Hello all, welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, we'll be learning about while loops. In the previous tutorial, we learned about the for loop. Now, the difference between for loop and while loop is just that in the case of for loop, we use a variable and we keep incrementing it inside the for loop. Whereas in the case of while loop, in the process of executing our code, we keep incrementing the value of that variable. And just in case we forget to increment or decrement the value of that variable inside the loop, then this could end up being a never ending loop. So that is something which we have to be very careful about when we are using a while loop. Let me demonstrate that with an example. So in the case of while loop, we have to start off with a while statement here, and inside the bracket, let's say we have a variable I and we want to execute this while loop till I reaches a value of 10. So less than equal to 10. Now for the system to understand that there is a variable called I that already exists, we have to first initialize the value of I. So now if I say I equal to 1 and then I execute the while loop. Now just like the for loop, we have to use the curly braces in R. And inside the while loop, we can use something like the print function. And now here we are printing the value of I. But we should not stop here. We also have to keep incrementing or changing the value of the variable which we have initialized here. Otherwise, the value of I, which is 1, and since 1 is less than equal to 10, it gets printed. The value of I, which is 1 now, gets printed. Again, the while loop gets executed. It again checks I is still less than 1, so it gets printed, and this loop will never end. So that is the only problem or a drawback with while loop if we are not cautious of incrementing or decrementing the value of the variable. So here we have to reassign the value of the variable I by saying I equal to I plus 1. So now the value of I becomes 2. And again, it goes back to the while loop. It checks 2 is less than equal to 10. So it prints the value of I, which is 2, and then increments, it increases to 3. And this loop goes on till the value of I is less than equal to 10. So it will get printed till the value of I reaches 10. So let me execute this. I has been initialized to 1. And now once we execute this while loop, the numbers get executed, the numbers get printed from 1 to 10 here. So just what I was illustrating. Now let me just comment this particular line. And now let me reinitialize the value of I to 1. And if I execute the while loop all over again, and if I click on the run button, if you see, this is a never ending loop and always the value of 1 only gets printed. That is a problem with a while loop. And this is never going to stop. So we have to interrupt the kernel. And the way we do that in R is using this particular interrupt R icon, which is red. Click on this and the kernel is disturbed. So this is how we execute the while loop in R. There is another way of executing a while loop, something like while true. So we are assuming that the condition is always true. So if we use something like this, then we have to, inside the while loop, we have to come up with something which changes or somehow breaks the loop. So once again, let's say we assign a value of I as 1. And now inside the while loop, we print the value of I, and we also keep incrementing the value of I by 1. Now we have to put some condition so that if that condition is not satisfied, we can break out of the while loop. So say if I greater than 10, then you break out of it, else it is just going to continue. So let me execute this line first and then I shall explain once again. So I have initialized the value of I to 1, and now if I execute this while loop, it gets printed up to the value of 10. So what is happening here is, once the value of I is initialized to 1, it prints 1, which is what is getting printed here, and then I gets incremented to 2. If I is greater than 10, no, it is not. So it again goes back to the while loop. So the situation here is that it is still true because we have not done any changes in the logical statement. Now, since now the value of I is 2, it prints 2 here, and now I gets incremented by 1, so its value is now 3, and like this it continues, and once the value of I reaches 9, then 9 is getting printed, and then the value of I gets changed to 9 plus 1, which is 10. So if 10 is greater than 10, again that is not the case, so 10 also gets printed, and now once 10 is printed, I now becomes 10 plus 1, which is 11. So if 11 is greater than 10, yes, indeed, 11 is greater than 10. So now it breaks out of the while loop. And that's how we get only the values from 1 to 10 printed using this while loop. Now let's look at a very similar example in Python. So even in Python, we have to initialize the value of the variable. So I equal to 1. And then to write a while loop here, it's very similar to what we have in R, except that we don't use the curly braces and the bracket here. So if I say while I less than equal to 10, and just like we have the for statement, we use a colon. And once we click on the enter button, we already have this auto indentation. And here we just print I, and now we also have to change the value of I equal to I plus 1. And once we do that, if we now just execute this statement here, it prints up to the value of 10. Similarly, if I just comment this line and execute this, this is just going to go on and on. As you can see, this scroll bar here, it is just going on and on. It is a never ending thing that will just keep going on and on. So that is the only drawback with a while loop. We have to be extra careful about how we use the while loop here. So now again, to stop the kernel, I can either click on this interrupt the kernel here. So now it is interrupted, and let me execute this by removing the comment here. So we have I printed from the value of 1 to the value of 10. Similarly, if we use the logical statement true, in the true statement only T has to be capital, unlike in R where everything is capital. So while true, again before the while statement, we have to once again initialize the value of I. Say we initialize it, let's for a change initialize it to 10. And now inside the while loop, what we have to do is we have to print the value of I. And now if we have to see if the value of I is less than 0, then we have to come out of the while loop. So that is what we are trying to achieve here using this while loop. So what do we do for that? We have to reduce the value of I. Say I equal to I minus, let's say 2 in this case. I equal to I minus 2. And now in the if statement, I would be asking if I is less than 0, then break. Else it will continue printing the value of I. So now if I execute this if statement here, so because I is getting decremented by the value of 2, so first the value of I is printed as 10, and then the value of I changes to 8 because I equal to 10 minus 2, which is 8. If I is less than 0, no, 8 is not less than 0. So again, the while loop gets called, and now the value of I is 8. So 8 gets printed, and now the value of I changes from 8 minus 2, which is 6. And that is still not less than 0. So this if statement will not get called. So like this, it continues till once the value of I is 2, 2 gets printed, and now the value of I is 2 minus 2, which is 0. So if 0 is less than 0, no. So again, there is no break involved here because it doesn't operate this, it doesn't perform this if condition because if condition is not yet satisfied. So it again comes back to the while loop, and 0 gets printed. Now the value of I is 0 minus 2, which is minus 2. So now if minus 2 less than 0, yes, so it breaks out of the while loop. So this is how a while loop operates in R and Python. Most of them, as far as the syntax is concerned, it's more or less similar, except that Python follows indentation. That is one difference. R does not have any indentation. You can even type it like this. So that's not a problem in R. You can test it out at your end. This still works in R. But as far as Python is concerned, we have to follow indentation. So that is one difference. The second difference being So here we have to put the condition inside the bracket, whereas in Python we can just keep it open, and then we have to use the colon here and we have to use the curly braces here in R. So these are the only minor differences as far as R and Python are concerned. As far as the while loop is concerned, we shall work on a few exercises in the upcoming tutorials on all the loops that we have learned: for loop, while loop, and also the if condition, just like we have incorporated here, so that we get a better understanding of all these scenarios. If you're liking my tutorial, please do subscribe to my channel if you have not yet subscribed. And if you have any suggestions, feedback, questions, please do post them in the comment section. See you in the next tutorial. Thank you very much.